Hey guys, Starks here. On the last video we did, we got the string set on my Roots Longbow. We talked about brace height, stuff like that. The steps that I did to put a new string on my bow. Today we're going to talk about how I get the nock height set for how I want. We just kind of put on a rough setting yesterday. We're going to talk about a few things. I did have a really good question yesterday about the brace height, and I kind of want to go over that. The question is, if the brace height is a little higher than what I was running last time, why wouldn't I just get a little longer string? And that is 1000% what I would do in a competition series. If I was shooting a USA tournament or going back overseas or whatever to shoot the World 3D, I would absolutely want this bow to shoot as fast as I could possibly get it with wooden arrows. There's a few things that I have to deal with as an archer. To give you a little background on me, I'm 5'8", petite 235, but I've got really long arms. My wingspan is somewhere around 74 inches. So my draw, if I anchor here, which is my high anchor right at the side of my nose, my draw here is 30 inches. If I drop down to the corner of my mouth like most archers, I've got a 31-inch draw. So a few things that I have to deal with in that is arrow length, especially on wood arrows. Most of the time when you buy a standard wood arrow, you guys are getting the 32-inch. 32-inch arrow with 125 grains up front. This is my 30-meter arrow with a really high anchor. A lot of that is my bow weight. You got to remember, I just started shooting competitive longbow about a year ago or so. The bow that I got from Mr. Holler, my Roots Longbow, is a 48 at 30. So I'm running probably about 8 pounds higher than most people would on a 3D type setup. Most of my longbow competitors, they are shooting around a 40 pound, maybe even a little less pound bow. So I've got 8 more pounds to deal with. I would have done it a little different if I would have been aware of that. So speed to me is not necessarily an issue on what I'm setting up this bow for. This bow, I'm actually setting up, the Kentucky ASA has brought back the trad class this year. We've got a really wide set general rule. Most of that is catered to a recurve. This is the longbow. So we do allow carbon arrows to be shot in that series. World Archery does not. If I'm shooting a longbow in World Archery, I have to shoot wood arrows. Wood arrows are a lot heavier than carbon. So yes, you're absolutely right. I would want the fastest bow I could get. Wood arrows too, and World Archery and longbow, we can actually carry different sets of arrows. So for instance, this is my 30-meter arrow, 32-inch. This is my 15-meter or so arrow. Had to have custom made. Those are actually 36-inch. So at 15 yards or so in, this is my arrow. At 30 meters or 34 yards, this is my arrow, and I'll actually have a mid-range arrow, 25 yards or so. I'll do a 34-inch arrow. Now the reason that's important, the arrow length, is we actually aim off the front of that arrow. I'll get into that more later. But that's why I'm not really concerned about the speed of this bow as far as having a little longer length. But you are absolutely right. If I was shooting wood arrows in a World Archery competition, I'd want this bow to be faster. So we're going to get into that setup today with our carbon arrows. And every longbow competitor out there in the world just cringe shooting carbon arrow through a longbow. But here's the reason I'm doing it. I plan on shooting longbow at Lancaster next year, as well as the 3D World Trials next year, and hopefully the 3D competition, the world competition, that'll be in Yankton, South Dakota in 26. So I'm wanting to shoot my bow, but I'm wanting to be competitive now, and I have to run one style arrow in what I'm competing in. So I'm gonna choose to run carbons. I can't run different lengths and everything like I can in World Archery. So we're getting this bow set up for carbon. And that's what most people around here would do, or most people that are in traditional archery that are trying to break into their local clubs and stuff. They're not going to go deal with the wood arrows and do that. They're going to go grab carbon arrows. These are shop supply, picked them up off the shelf. This is the setup that most people are going to use, and that's kind of what this video series is for, is to help those beginners get out and have an understanding of the tuning. So, having said all that, we've got the nocking point set roughly on this bow. Here's what I'm going to try to do. I want to get this nocking point set 15 yards or so with a good barrel shaft tune, and I'll go over that. So pretty much the barrel shaft tuning, and I'll show you pictures here in a minute. When I shoot a group of arrows, it's really simple. If I've got 3 or 4 arrows, then I shoot a group in down there, and then I've got this barrel shaft dude. We are going to shoot a group, doesn't matter where they go on the target, we just want a good tight group. So if you got the group here, and this barrel shaft comes in and shoots low, that tells me that my nocking point is too high. Think of your arrow rest as a ramp, the nocking point are your strings back here. So if your nocking point is too high, those arrows are going to ramp down just a little bit. If nocking point's too low, they're going to ramp up. So the deal is, I'd like to get this barrel shaft in with these groups if possible. I know these arrows might be a little weak for what I'm doing. They're full length, 34 inch. They're a 700 spine, which some people might think that's a little weak for the poundage bow I'm pulling. I should probably be in a 500 or 600. A lot of that has to do with the point weight. I'm running a really low point weight, but I'm also on my bow is not cut past center. So if it was cut to center or past center, yes, I would need a stiffer arrow. I'm only going just a little weaker to get around that bow grip. Another thing with my anchor is I'm actually outside just a little bit with my anchor as opposed to being here. So I will traditionally shoot left just a little bit, so I've got to aim farther right. A weaker arrow helps me to get that gap shortened. If I was shooting 40, 50 yards, yeah, I would have to do something about that and get it in. But at 25 yards and under, it's really not that big of a deal for me. Having said all that, here's what I did on the barrel shaft. These arrows weighed a certain amount. When I took the fletchings off this, it dropped about 12 grains. So I actually wrapped some tape back here on the back. That will help simulate the weight difference. The more weight you put in the back, the stiffer the arrow becomes. So if you take the fletchings off and the barrel shaft tune, they're going to show weak anyways. So do yourself a favor, weigh your arrows, put enough tape back there to make up the difference. Okay, one more thing on arrows before we go start shooting. Check with your bowyer about the grains per pound of pull of your bow. If you're running an old bear bow or an old Pearson bow that you pulled out of your attic, first of all, take it to the bow shop, have it checked, make sure the limbs are in good shape. But you're going to want to stay around 10 to 12 pounds of pull for that bow. And the reason that's important is because of the limb design on those bows. Once you reach a certain point or a light arrow, it's acting like a dry fire in that bow. This bow has the limb tips really built up, really nice. I've talked with Jamie about this bow in particular, and he said, look, if you're running 8.5 pound or grains of arrow per pound of pull, you're gonna be good. If you have a bow blow up, Black Widow, whatever custom bow you've got, don't be surprised if they ask you that question. Hey, my bow blew up, limbs broke. They're going to say, how much does your arrow weigh? Very important. So these arrows, and to tell you why that's important, I weighed these arrows, did a little research here. These arrows, full length, weigh 7.1 grains per inch. You've got about 12 grains of fletching. I think these are about 10 grains of nocks. I've got 12 or so grains of inserts plus point weight. I put these on a scale, and what I come up with, I thought, man, I'm gonna put some 100 grain points in here, see if I can make rockets out of them. That came up to 392 grains total, 8.167 grains of arrow per pound of pull. That is not going to work in this bow. Would it shoot? Yes. Could it hurt the bow a long time? Absolutely. So Jamie and I talked again, like I said, that number needs to be 8.5, so I want to stay above that. I dropped 125 grain tips in these arrows. Come out for a number of 416 grains total weight, 8.667. So I am good to shoot these in this setup here without fear of damaging the bow. So that's pretty important. And the reason I say that, if you're shooting a 50-pound bow and you go to your bowyer and you pull out some VAP V1s and you run through here, you're going to essentially be dry firing your bow. Now, this is just for a target setup. This is not for a hunting setup. My hunting arrows, I did wood arrows this year. They were, out of this bow, I was running 890 grains, probably a little overkill, but I wanted my point on at exactly 20 yards, and I used the weight of the tip to get me there. And they were closer to about 18.5 grains per pound of pull, so way, way, way safe. So we're going to get into the actual barrel shaft tuning. I'm going to do a little shooting, and we're going to come back and explain what my goals are with the barrel shaft tuning. We're going to just get where that barrel shaft, like I said, is up in those groups, not up or down. I'm not really concerned about left or right as much. They're probably going to be a little right, it's going to be a little weak. We'll go into that. I'm not really sweating that. I want to try to get that height. That height may change as I start to shoot, because my goal is to get a point on at 25 yards and run this arrow as light as I can. So I may have to move the nocking point back up a little to get that in there, and that will affect my gaps as we go closer to the target. That's the main thing. So I'm gonna go shoot some, we're gonna take some pictures, and I'll come back and we'll talk about it. All right, guys, I'm set up at about 15 yards or so. I'm gonna do a few shots and shoot a barrel shaft. So let's see where the groups go. I'm not worried about hitting the target in a certain spot. I'm gonna aim at the spot that's there on that 3D core, and I'm just going to try to get a good group. Hitting pretty high, totally expected that. So we're going to see where the second one goes. Same spot. Another thing I'm trying to do, guys, those that spin around me or shot around me know that I really cant that bow heavily. So I'm working on getting a tune where I can set this bow more straight up and down to have a little bit of room, especially while I'm shooting an indoor setup. So pluck a little, but that's still where I want it. Now I'm gonna shoot this barrel shaft. We're gonna see where it goes. Not too bad. So let's go down target and see what we got. Okay, guys, you can see what I'm talking about here. I was aiming at this spot, and you can see where my arrows went up there. Pretty good group. But you see where this little barrel shaft is hanging out by itself? It's shooting a hair weak, still going into the target straight, but shooting a hair weak. But my nocking point is maybe just a little too high. I'm going to adjust that down. We're going to get some good arrow flight. Then I'm going to back up to about 25 yards is my point on, and I'm going to start working with that and see what we can come up with. All right, guys, here's another little tip. I left my square in the house. Didn't feel like going and getting it. So I'm going to show you a little tip that I use on making these adjustments on these nocking points. I come to the side of that nocking point, and I'll actually draw a line on the bottom side. If I want to move it down, I'm gonna draw it on the bottom side, just a little mark around that nocking point. Then I'll loosen it up. I'll move it down to cover that nock. That does two things. One, it gives me about a 1/16 or so, a little over 1/16 of an inch to move that nocking point down. I can use it for for a measuring method, but I know now that if I accidentally move that the wrong way, or if I move it too far, I've got a mark set where that nocking point started out at. So that's pretty valuable information. So I'm going to shoot another group. I made a little adjustment. We're going to see how these go real quick. So my group should raise just a little with a lower knocking point. So if you can see where I'm aiming at that dot there, I'm just a little left of where that dot is, but it's not a crazy amount, so I can handle that in my gaps. Right there by it. Didn't follow through as much on that one, so that affected my shot. And that's another reason why I shoot groups, guys. If I make a mess up, plunk or not follow through, I can still get in the middle of the group and does pretty good. And kind of right there with it. Okay, now we're going to shoot this one, and it should raise this arrow up more in that group. I kind of flubbed that one. I'm going to reshoot that one and get a better shot on it. Okay, so that's part of doing this series. Don't have a big production studio and everything, but if you know you made a bad shot, don't go off that arrow. Pull it out and do another one. We don't want to make our tune like us. So we're going to recreate that shot. There. So that was a lot better shot, a lot cleaner release. So let's go down and look. Okay, now you can see, here's my primary group. Here is my bear shaft. Still just a touch low, but I'm not really worried about it. That's pretty good arrow flight, especially out of a longbow.